I don't know.
Say it with me. I don't know.
Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. Now, I'm glad that we have the desire to understand the world. That results in all sorts of great stuff. We want to know everything. We're humans. We're curious. And maybe it's our culture. Maybe it's just humanity. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. Suddenly, I know that I don't know. But somehow everyone else seems to know. They all know differently from each other, but they all seem to know. What I'm saying is nobody's opinions are correct in the world. And yet it's impossible not to tie your opinions to your concept of self. And often people tie those things so closely together that they begin defending their guesses as if they're defending their very lives. In a way, they are. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 179 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Bob Pondillo and I interview Elle. That's not her real name because she's not out to many of her friends and family, after having left the Christian faith in which she was raised, Plymouth Brethren, and a part of the Quiverfull Movement. She has a lot to say about women's issues, adopting orphans with Down syndrome, and the abundance of sexual misconduct in the independent fundamental Baptist denomination. Before we get into our talk with Elle, the following is the compilation of my thoughts, Friedrich Nietzsche, in an essay titled Self-Knowledge as Self-Narration by Kaitlyn Creasy. We've talked a lot on this podcast over the years about agency, that ability and freedom to be ourselves, determine our own path, and be who it is that we truly are. Specifically in the context of having lost one's faith, Christianity in this case, where the self and the will were surrendered to God to be determined and directed by Him. Many of us ex-Christians have found it difficult to discover the self. This can be especially difficult for women, who shared the same oppression Christianity imposed on both genders, as well as the additional diminishment of women found in the Scriptures. Who am I, and what do I like? Am I driven by certain desires? If so, what are these drives? Where do they come from? And how much of who I am is innate, something I'm born with, and how much is shaped by my history, the contextual events of my life and my upbringing? What is it like to be present and engage with my circumstances as a volitional human being with genuine thoughts and authentic actions? Well, I'm here to tell you that this is a very complex endeavor, and I think some of us have been doing it wrong. Some might think that a powerful person is one who knows what they want and goes after it, and maybe even gets people to do it for them. Their personalities are large and loud. They fill up a room and suck the air out of it. They create vision boards and dreams and go after them. But Friedrich Nietzsche has a very different view of how truly powerful people discover and exercise their own agency. Nietzsche is one of the greatest philosophical minds of human history, and he has a lot to say on this subject of self-discovery. His position is that self-knowledge and agency are crucial to one becoming what we might call our best self. But he has strong opinions on how we attain self-knowledge. Throughout his work, Nietzsche insists on the inaccessibility of the self to itself, that humans are naturally ignorant of our own interior self. He's critical of the use of introspection for attaining self-knowledge. He compares one's interiority to an inaccessible fortress. Quote, man is very well defended against himself, his attempts to spy on himself and siege the castle walls. Usually he's able to make out no more of himself than his outer fortifications. The actual fortress is inaccessible to him, even invisible, unquote. Human beings are usually unable to access their inner world, much less understand its constitution. Nietzsche claims that however far a human may go in self-knowledge, nothing can be more incomplete than their image of the totality of their drives, and how those drives play and counterplay amongst one another. And above all, the laws of the nutriment or substance remain entirely unknown to him, unquote. He also says that nobody gives human beings their qualities, not even they themselves. The fatality of our essence cannot be separated from the fatality of all that was and will be. We are each necessary, a piece of fate, unquote. But to him, this is a good thing. He argues that, quote, to become what one is, one must not have the faintest notion what one is, unquote. This is somewhat of a everything is what it is or you are what you are theory. Not that we can't change, but we must start from an awareness and acceptance of what is, and that our knowledge of the self is not informed by introspection, but two external sources. One, our historical context, cultural environment. In other words, your story, your life up to this point. And the second way we learn who we are is the active self in the moment. In other words, how we show up in real time, just by being ourselves, our relaxed selves. What comes to our mind as people are talking, things are happening? How am I feeling at any given moment? And what is pleasant or unpleasant about this moment to me? How am I interacting with the form in which this moment is presenting itself? Let me try to unpack these 2 points. According to Nietzsche, powerful people establish a narrative of their lives, which includes significant moments as milestones in their development and concrete circumstances in which they identify as conditionings of their personal development. The reflection on one's personal narrative is a unique manifestation of one's historical sense. The development of this sense allows one to see herself as, quote, determined by systems and representatives of different cultures, that is to say, as necessary, but alterable, unquote. It is this construction of personal narrative, this reflection on one's life thus far, during which one attempts to understand previous experiences as conditions of one's development, which counts as one's self-knowledge to Nietzsche. One comes to know oneself, in other words, by constructing and reflecting on a picture of one's own development. This backward-looking reflection enables the person to fashion a uniquely individual personal narrative, which allows them, in some sense, to know their self, or to see it objectively. Nietzsche calls this setting up a real ego, accessible and fathomable to the agent. Nietzsche's claim is that, quote, direct self-observation is not nearly sufficient for us to know ourselves. We need history, for the past flows on within us in 100 waves, unquote. The German word Nietzsche uses there for history also means narrative. We need the story that shaped us, no matter what it is, no matter how many cringe moments there is in our memory. It is our story, and it's how we get to know ourselves. I can't remember the movie, but years ago there was a scene that struck me. The context was that the protagonist was frustrated with the painful, tumultuous relationship she had with her alcoholic mother, and a friend, in an attempt to encourage her, said, quote, you know, she's doing it to you, her mother did it to her mother before her, and sometimes you just have to say, fuck it, my life begins with me, unquote. And at the time, I loved that. As a Christian, I resented the lack of spirituality and devout Christian structure in my family tree. I was the most devout Christian my family had ever known, at least to my knowledge. I wanted to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit and His purpose for my life, And like Paul wrote in the New Testament, I needed to sever my ties to Adam, which was my biological family, and embrace my new heritage as an adopted child of God, a brother to Jesus, and an heir of my inheritance in the kingdom of God. Well, not only is that a fairy tale, but if Nietzsche's right, I don't have the convenience of ignoring my genealogy or the events of my formation that shaped and impressed who I am today, and to some extent, who I'll always be. The idea of looking to your story for self-knowledge is not to be confused with letting your identity be informed by other people. We can benefit from feedback from trusted friends, but no one gets to tell us who we are. No one knows the genealogy and the experiences that shaped you like you do. And even that knowledge, quote unquote, is blurred by your flawed memory and imperfect recollections. Nietzsche addresses this critically. Quote, the great majority do nothing for their ego their whole life long. What they do is done for the phantom of their ego, which has formed itself in the heads of those around them and has been communicated to them. As a consequence, they dwell in a fog of impersonal, semi-personal opinions. No individual among the majority is capable of setting up a real ego, accessible to him and fathomed by him, in opposition to the general pale fiction, and thereby annihilating it. Unquote. The second way that Nietzsche claims we learn who we are is how we are showing up as us at every moment of every day. He wrote, quote, we ourselves are, after all, nothing but our own sensation at every moment of this continued flow. Even here, when we wish to step down into the stream of our apparently most peculiar and personal development, Heraclitus's aphorism, you cannot step twice into the same river, holds good. Unquote. Nietzsche invites us to see each moment as pregnant with life-transforming potential, and we, the agent, are the mother and wet nurse of its potential. He calls this positive egoism, or ideal selfishness. We're looking to glean something, learn something, or be transformed in some way. It is a logical practice in which we engage a person or event over which we have no control in a way that brings forth something, perhaps a thought, an idea, or an action, into the world, out from oneself. Such ideal selfishness requires us to, quote, keep one's soul still, and to cultivate a reverential attitude for that which we are about to bring forth. This is not something we will into existence or create. It springs up from within, virtually bypassing the mind, from the soul, if you will. This kind of self-knowledge fashions a unique ego which is knowable to us and accessible only by us. This is not the negative connotation of the word ego, which is something we depersonalize. This is our core self, and what Nietzsche described as the deepest necessity for thriving. In this sense, this is not something that we can coach ourselves into by saying, I'm strong, I'm powerful, I'm beautiful. It's something that we already are, and we're accessing it. Nietzsche speaks explicitly of the critical significance of an affirmative receptivity for knowledge. He claims that, quote, one who really wants to get to know something new, be it a person, an event, or a book, does well to entertain it with all possible love, unquote. This means we start with love. We open ourselves up to what a person, event, or book might disclose. This makes me think of how Pete Holmes talks about magic shows. He doesn't understand why anyone would go with an agenda to deny the magic, saying to themselves with crossed arms, that's not real, or going to a comedy show with your laugh box all locked up tight. This attitude will directly ill affect the patron's experience. Wouldn't you rather make love with the moment and see what pops out? Wouldn't you rather go to a magic show or a comedy show ready to receive? You start with love and loving the moment that you're in. Another way of thinking of this attitude is when engaging people, we should seek first to understand and second to be understood. Or we could ask ourselves what we can learn from this person rather than what we can teach them. The paradox here is that by assuming the posture of a student rather than a teacher, we are doing what Nietzsche calls love. We are loving the object of our engagement, be it a person, event, or book, rather than judging it or guarding ourselves. To Nietzsche, loving consists of adopting an attitude of affirming receptivity, by which we may coax forth that which we are attempting to understand. To come to know something, we need to, quote, exercise effort and goodwill in order to endure it in spite of its strangeness. We need patience towards its aspect and expression, unquote. Nietzsche claims that in order to learn to see, to accustom the eye to composure, to patience, to letting things come about, to put off judgment, is the first preliminary schooling in spirituality, not to react to a stimulus right away, but to keep in check the instinct to restrict or exclude. What is essential in learning to see and love is to be able to put off or postpone the decision to judge the thing. In other words, to say yes to it. Only a powerful person with a robust self-knowledge can comfortably take on the role of the learner, can feel lucky to be with the person or the circumstance in which they find themselves, to, like a campfire, kneel down and blow. So in summary, the construction of a narrative as the identification of certain milestones of personal development allows one to recognize that one is already held open to external influences. For it is this interaction between one's constitution and one's world that makes one what one is. Nietzsche's own manifestation of self-knowledge and self-narration also allows us to see that those moments which offer the most potential for transformation are those moments in which we are most open and vulnerable to that which we are encountering. In those moments, when we encounter what we love, like a mother and a wet nurse, we become able to understand and be shaped by these influences. In Nietzsche's picture of self-knowledge, one is required to reflect on the individual's moments, texts, and places and ask oneself, how is it that these things are forming me? This reflective questioning almost always ends in the same answer. One's constitution is most fundamentally transformed by those things which one approaches with an attitude of favor and openness. It is these things which provoke the most extreme and intense responses and thus enact the most incredible transformations. Powerful, self-aware people capable of taking stock of themselves are those who reflect on their narrative and interpret themselves anew with every subsequent narrative. Nietzsche cites a practice of personal self-reflection which opens up the space in one's soul for spontaneous growth and activity. Nietzsche describes this tendency as, quote, temporary isolation, accompanied by strict refusal of busyness, a most profound stock-taking of oneself and self-recovery that desires to avoid not temptations but duties, a detachment from the tyranny of stimuli and influences that condemn us to spend our strength in nothing but reactions and does not permit their accumulation to the point of spontaneous activity, unquote. This definition of agency undermines traditional notions of agency, according to which our intentions bring about our actions. As complex embodiments of drives and values, we act upon a world with its own drives and values, a world in which we are connected, embedded, in fact. And this driven world acts also upon us, and we are changed. I'll close with aphorism number 119 from Nietzsche's book, Dawn of Day. Quote, every moment of our lives sees some of the tentacles of our being grow and others of them wither, all according to the substance which the moment does or does not bear with it. Take some trifling experience. Suppose we were in the marketplace one day, and we noticed someone laughing at us as we went by. This event will signify this or that to us according to whether this or that drive happens at the moment to be at its height in us, and it will be a quite different event according to the kind of person we are. One person will absorb it like a drop of rain. Another will shake it from him like an insect. Another will try to pick a quarrel. Another will examine his clothing to see if there's anything about it that might give rise to laughter. Another will be led to reflect on the nature of laughter as such. Another will be glad to have involuntarily augmented the amount of cheerfulness and sunshine in the world. And in each case, a drive has gratified itself, whether it be the drive to annoyance, or to combativeness, or to reflection, or to benevolence. This drive within us seized the event as its prey. Why precisely this one? Because, thirsty and hungry, it was lying in wait. What then are our experiences? Much more that which we put into them than that which they already contain. We taped this conversation on November 4th, 2017. We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world's a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge $1 per episode or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode was recorded by Sam Mayer on a handpan in the New York City subway. Thank you for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is. So today our guest is Elle. You're going, third person. Why would I do that?
Yeah.
You're going by Elle. It's not your real name. So you're not out of the closet or whatever.
I'm not, no. I've thought about it a lot. Even coming on the show made me think why I'm choosing not to be, but it's primarily family at this point. My parents, my husband's parents, my sisters, his sibling. It's scary to think what may happen. And our parents are all aging, and when they believe as deeply as they do, it would be very hard on them.
Yeah. I tried to do the same thing as far as keep it from my mom, because she's 89 now. But it got around to her, and it's been a giant disappointment. I mean, every time I talk to her, she's, wanting me to come back to Jesus, etc.
Yeah.
So you were raised, what denomination, I guess?
It's interesting because my parents both graduated from Bob Jones University. They were both from different religious backgrounds, but kind of both jumped into fundamentalism. But then my dad became involved with Christian servicemen centers and started one of his own.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, back in the day, instead of going to the USO to party and drink, the men could go to the Christian Servicemen Center. He had games.
So military.
Yes. Yeah. My dad was, that's where my dad was introduced to Christianity. Or I should clarify, he was Lutheran, loosely Lutheran. Anyways.
Evangelicalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the YMCA. Or the YWCA, because that was a pushback too. The creation of the YMCA and YWCA was Young Men's Christian Association. Make sure those whores, those terrible whores, whores.
What's that?
A whore.
A whore.
Yeah.
Is that how they pronounced it?
Yes, that's how they pronounce it.
That's weird.
But making sure that young men in big cities won't be
tempted to go get prostitutes
in any way, or drink or what have you. Yeah, make it clean and happy and fresh.
That's the idea, and evangelism also.
Oh, well, that's
Bible studies
for the locals or for other servicemen.
Servicemen who come into the area, because where we lived there was a large military base.
Yeah.
So, But somehow he got into this movement, and I think you've had one other guest on here who was from Plymouth Brethren.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's as close to independent fundamental Baptist as you can get, except they believe in elder leadership instead of pastors. You wear head coverings. The women do, not the men.
In the service.
Oh,
like
yes.
the Sunday morning service.
Oh, yes. And you have the Lord's Supper every week.
Kind of a prayer shawl, right? I mean, it's just the following of Paul's recommendation that women should cover their heads.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it's a big deal. For instance, my mother-in-law, she wears one at home when she prays or reads the Bible. So she takes it very seriously, that verse about a woman covering her head.
Wow.
Yes. And so that movement is, some of the churches like this I consider very cultish, very closed off. They really kind of think they're the only people.
Yeah, very us and them.
Yes, very much, very insular. My dad, because he had some Bob Jones experience, he had some friends who were Baptists and Presbyterians, and so he wasn't quite. My husband was also Plymouth Brethren, and really we married, that was important to marry someone in the Brethren movement, you know. They call them assemblies. So his assembly was extremely cultish, and his.
What year would this be when he was in the military? And like
my father,
like the formation of his Christianity was going from Lutheran to these extremes.
In the 60s, I'm guessing.
Okay,
Yes,
That's what I guess too.
and a guy like that, I mean, it takes one to know one, is on a mission to be a man after God's own heart. Like, you want to get this right. So as he's, his journey, Pilgrim's Progress, is going from like Lutheran. He's like, wow, I'm really missing out on this. And so he goes that direction. Then he hears about Bob Jones. And there's just an earnestness to that. It's hard to find fault with the intent. Because once you are convinced that there's a God and that he's good and he's loving, and you want to be a man after God's own heart, you want him to look down from heaven and say, that is my son and I'm well pleased. There's just that earnestness to earn and gain the respect of God, the honor of God, to where then God will honor your life. He'll make your path straight. He'll prosper your crops, so to speak. Whatever it is that you put your hand to, God's going to bless it. And you don't want to be outside that blessing. You want to be under the umbrella of God's protection, of his blessing. And if this is your construct, the lens through which you see the world, I'm just saying it's hard to fault a guy for doing his best with what he thinks is right. Now we know with hindsight, maybe you do.
It just makes me think, boy, you could probably sell a lot of insurance to a guy like that. You know what I mean? You can just sell just about it. Yeah, just a little too. I'm sorry, I know it's your dad, but
no,
a little too. Yeah,
Well, there isn't any critical.
Yeah. Where's the thinking? The critical thinking skills. But that's just me.
Well, it's interesting because I don't think I've ever met anyone as good at the compartmentalization that Christians do as my father, because he's...
I'm sure he's a very smart man.
He's extreme intellectual. He's actually, he's a pastor, but he's an educator also. He likes to teach, and he did some college classes years ago. He reads more than anybody I know, gave me the love of reading, and he raised me, and even though we were in a very anti-intellectualism culture, he raised me reading, fine literature.
Okay.
And
classics and...
Oh, yes. He made me do book reports extra from school. I think he saw in me we had shared something in common, but for instance, I did Dante's Inferno. He made me read that when I was... high school.
That's a hard read too.
Yeah, things like that. I love Dickens and all. Just the classics, and so things that were allowed, I should say. Everything that's old is allowed. And so he's very good at compartmentalization, and I think about that a lot with myself because I was very good at it too. But at his age and how much life experience he has, it's surprising.
So
to me.
To this day, he's fundamentalist.
He is. He has softened on some things, as I think many people do as they grow older. He would be very disapproving of some of the movement that we came out of,
Okay.
So,
but homosexuality or that kind of stuff.
Oh my goodness,
he's pretty tough.
Oh yes.
Sorry.
Would you say he's a 6-day creationist, or and that the Earth is only 6,000 years? Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a lot of compartments. Because if he's read, What do you know his position on evolution? That he thinks it's bunk, or
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
I have not discussed that with him.
okay? So let's get into where he meets your mom, and then they decide together to be Quiverfull.
Yes, I don't know exactly how it came about, but they met at Bob Jones, very conservative. They were older when they got married, 28 and 35, and so immediately started having a family. I was born a year.
You're the firstborn.
Yes, firstborn. I was born a year after they were married, like almost exactly. And
How many kids?
7 total.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, your poor mom.
The oldest of 7.
Well, they got a late starter. Otherwise, they'd have had more.
She would have kept going. My youngest sister was born when my mom was older than me, I think, in her mid-40s.
Wow.
Yes.
You come from a wealthy family?
No.
How is that possible?
Absolutely not.
It's not.
I'm
possible.
going 2, 4, 6, 8. That's almost $1 million right there. How are you going to pay for that?
Well,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. 7 kids. Geez.
yes.
Are any of the other siblings, similar to your journey, or is everybody as fundamentalist as your dad?
By the way, it's all girls
Oh,
in my
wow.
family.
Isn't that something?
I know.
Wow.
And my youngest sister, who I said is 14 years younger than me, she is on a similar trajectory. It's kind of becoming clear with politics. The era of Trump has made a lot of things clear. And she is very liberal politically. And so I'm seeing and I've had some discussions with her where I've been very close to being open about everything, but she might suspect.
Yeah.
My other sisters, no, we do not talk about it. They're in fundamental Baptist churches for the most part, or very conservative evangelical. We just don't discuss those things. In fact, I tried one time with my father. I ended up getting a letter from him full of Bible verses. And
You tried what?
Just chatting with them about it.
yes,
Yeah.
explaining some of my doubts that
How
I was
long ago?
having. This was in 2014. I had already, I was close. I had already gotten to the final stages, I guess, but I had been to China to adopt one of our children. And at that trip, I could not believe the number of people in that country. Everywhere we went,
yeah.
It was just,
Massive.
I mean, I could not have pictured it. Everybody says there's so many people, but you just can't visualize it until you're there. And the entire time I was there, I just was thinking, all of these people in
Going to
hell,
hell.
really?
Yeah.
And then people with disabilities over there tend to be used on the streets as beggars. So we would walk the streets and I would see elderly people or teenagers with disabilities. That was mostly what I saw.
Now, when you say used, by who?
Well, they say not to. When you travel, they tell you, the adoption agency says don't give money because sometimes these people are put where they're at by people who are using them and they get the money. Somebody else gets the money. It doesn't go to And I could see how that could be the case because most of these people could not walk that I saw.
So somebody is using the pity, that people would have on the street to get money, and they're probably giving a little bit of it to them, but they're exploiting that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
absolutely.
exploitation.
Where
I
were
think.
you? Beijing or some big city?
We went to about 4 different cities, but we did go to Beijing and then south, and then we ended up in Hong Kong. But
Wow. Yeah, there's 1 billion people there. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. and they have restrictions on how many kids you can have because of it, right?
Yes.
Or is that
They used to not, but I think they do now. Yeah.
Well, they've had a one-child policy for over a decade at least, and they just changed it to 2 children because they're having the huge disparity of elderly versus young population-wise. They're seeing some of the results of that, an aging population. But it's just a massive amount of people.
So you're such a good person to go and get a child in China.
Well, I have to say that it's been the most wonderful thing in my life, adopting. We adopted 2 children.
So you and your husband, and you mentioned that your husband was PB.
Yes.
And that's your husband now?
Yes.
So has he deconverted as well?
No, he has not. We were all along together on the trajectory for quite a bit of the way. And I think he's at that place where he's trying not to think about it anymore. And
Can't go any further.
yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
That happens to a lot of people because you start deconstructing this and then, it's very, very scary. We all know that. That's why we have this show. And it's so scary that some people say, nope. Can't go any further. This is the comfort zone, They can't step across that line, and
into the chaos that is around us.
Yeah. So how's that working out? I mean, for you guys, as far as he knows that you've actually gone further, and
Yes.
or do you have to kind of? It's the elephant in the room, and yet you can't talk about it, right?
We try not to.
Yeah,
we are trying to just have, fun conversations, light conversations. We had theology conversations for, the majority of our marriage.
How long have you guys been together?
22 years.
Wow, that's outstanding. How old are the kids now then?
I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son, and then a 14-year-old daughter because we adopted her. And then my youngest is 10.
So the first two are biological.
Yes.
Okay. And then what went through your head with you and your husband as far as like the idea to adopt?
Well, this is interesting because I was on Facebook, and one of my friends, who was another homeschooling mother, she posted about a child who people were trying to raise money for him to be adopted. And she posted his picture, and he was just darling. I saw his picture, and I just thought, why? We had 2 biological children. We had the resources, and I was like, he looked a lot. My husband has an older brother with Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And so we were very just instantly, connected with that picture. And it turns out that the person raising money for this little boy was an atheist.
No, Mom.
Of course.
Yes. And we had a mutual friend who shared, and that is another huge, I was, almost 40, and I had never had a friend who was an atheist.
Let alone a good one.
Right. And somebody who had done such a wonderful thing and who cared about, children with Down syndrome. It just was another step.
So the boy in the picture, is that the one you ended up? Yeah.
We did. I showed him to my husband, and he actually said right away, let's go get him. Let's go get him. We didn't know where he was, and he ended up being in Russia.
Wow.
It was an expensive, long double trip.
What do you and your husband do for a living?
He is a chemical engineer.
Wow.
I have worked part-time at, the Christian school where my children used to go. And then once we adopted our youngest, I decided to stay home. It was just too much. Yeah. And he came with a lot of difficulties and challenges.
Mm-hmm. And you've had him for how many years now?
6 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then you found another one.
Yes. Actually, my oldest daughter would look on the internet at orphans.
So your biological kids are really into this.
Oh, yes. If they had not been, this wouldn't have been a consideration.
It could be divisive.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. They were very excited, but their uncle, who has Down syndrome, he's just the light of their lives, all of us. He's wonderful. He's almost 60. And my children love him so much. So so my oldest daughter, she kept on looking on the internet at all these videos of children who needed families. And she came across an 11-year-old Chinese girl and who was doing ballet. It was so cute.
Also Down?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And she came and she wrote us letters asking if we would please adopt her. And we had just gotten to a good point with our youngest. And we were like, oh, I don't know. But it was true. Once I watched the video, she was going to be ours.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
So that was your trip to China.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was in 2014. So 3 years she's been home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm amazed and so grateful that there are people like you to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be people like me. Well, not anymore, but.
Well, it's not for everyone. Absolutely. And, apparently I love being a caretaker, but, they give me a lot of fulfillment, especially now, honestly.
Huh. So given not the tension, but I don't want to presume that, but given the difference in you and your husband's faith or lack thereof, how do you raise the kids?
Yeah.
Well, the 2 children with Down syndrome, that's just not a concern at all. Mm-hmm. They just are loving life no matter what.
Now, would your husband's theology say, because there's this thing, an age of accountability. And a lot of Christians.
Oh, my.
Yeah,
yes.
Sure. Yeah, they talk about, like, if you're below this age, you're going to get a ticket to heaven because you're not accountable for your sin. And maybe there's the same type of ticket for Down syndrome. I don't know. And there
is.
Yeah.
There
okay.
is.
Is it really?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they're not accountable.
Yes. My mother-in-law believes that, they're all going to be in heaven, and there's no chapter or verse, even though they're biblical literalists, and, they really believe that.
Well, they have to.
Because they're seen as children, eternal children or something.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
And
I get it.
Good-hearted Christians can't picture a God who would do that. And so they just, they can't proof text it, but it's got to be true because God is good.
Sure.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Isn't that something? Mm-hmm. So how about the other kids then?
My oldest two, I guess I could go ahead into this factors in with me and my journey and my husband also. And I asked, by the way, my husband said, I asked him what I could say about him and what his beliefs were, because I didn't want to talk for him. And he said, well, I'm a liberal Christian. I'm a universalist. So,
okay.
He's the good kind is what I say.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, I did the same thing. I started out with heaven and hell separation. Mm-hmm. Then I went to, so your husband's all the way to everybody's saved. God's not going to send anybody to hell.
That's right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
He's come a long way.
Yeah.
Come on, Bob. Give him credit, man.
No,
hard work.
I do. I look at it and I think, well, here's a man that is a chemical engineer, which is like math, science, and you got to know your shit. You really got to know your stuff.
Yeah.
And yet the compartmentalization that you talk about, there it is. You're able to go, yeah, but not that.
Is he
this, but not that.
Does he embrace evolution as a theory?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good on him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it?
It is. And he is extremely smart.
I bet.
And all those things. But it's been a hard journey for us. Extremely hard. I know there's many people who it's been hard for. So
I don't think there's anybody who it's not been hard for.
Right.
If their deconversion was not hard, then they never really were that devout.
Absolutely.
That's the rule. If you were devout and you loved God with your whole heart, and he was your best friend, and he'd gotten you through a lot of things, and you'd experienced his presence in quiet time and prayer and worship, and it was real, that's going to be hard. No way around it.
Wow.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's true. You've had said that before, and I always think, yes, we were so devout. We were so, we had to have both the emotion and the theology behind everything. So.
Oh boy.
So
we were talking about your kids, and where your two biologicals, where do they stand on their faith?
Once I came out and told my husband, and we had been on this journey for a little bit.
Out as what on the spectrum?
That I was
agnostic?
not able to believe anymore.
Okay.
Yes.
But you haven't maybe not used the atheist word, or where are you on the labels, if you care to?
It's the same thing. I think that you would agree. It's atheist is.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's a lack of belief in God, and that's where I'm at. I have no belief in God.
Yeah.
But
humanist. That's always good because they
absolutely.
say this says what I'm not, but here's what I am.
Yeah,
I'm a humanist. Yeah, and look at you. What a wonderful woman. You care for these children that are out there that have no one, and wow.
That's what we used to call it in the scriptures, above reproach.
Yes.
Yeah, but there you go,
yes.
Above reproach.
So if somebody wants to come after you and say your atheism has made you a bad person, they can't do it.
How are they going to do that?
They would have a hard time because
that's right. Good on you. Own it. You're a good person.
It's true. When we were Christians in fundamental Baptist churches, we did everything. I headed every women's ministry thing and taught Awana, and we were just very active.
What
Awana? We've talked about it on the show before. It's basically a curriculum.
Oh, okay.
For homeschool and for intense, training up a child in the way he should go.
I get you.
A lot of verse memorization.
Speaking of that, do you homeschool your kids, or do they go to college or high school?
No,
or whatever?
the minute things started falling apart for me, they were put in public school, and.
But your oldest spent how long in Christian school?
Okay, up through middle school and went into high school. I have some regrets about that, although we have a very close relationship. She's just a wonderful person, but it was really hard.
How's she doing?
What was hard?
Doing great.
In high school.
Going into high school.
Oh, going into public school.
Public school.
Heck yeah. Culture shock.
It was.
It's a culture shock if you went from public elementary or middle to high school, still a culture shock. But when you're going from Christian middle school to public high school. Yeah, that's tough.
Yes, it was difficult.
Did she resent you for a while for doing it, or did she?
I think probably.
Can't put words in her mouth. Or...
Yeah, she wouldn't have said that to me, but she does complain about some of the things that homeschooling, that she didn't get when homeschooling.
Didn't prepare her for that.
Yes. Yeah. Although we always, because education was important to me, I always did co-ops and had them do science outside of my home, things that I couldn't teach well, but still.
Mm-hmm.
So did you, like your father, assign extra book reports to them in there?
I would have loved to, but I'm not that strict.
Yeah. So were you yourself homeschooled?
Well, I was for 1 year, my senior year, and that was...
Wait a second. So you're the firstborn.
Yes.
You went through public school all the way to your senior year?
A private school.
Oh, private school,
yes.
Christian school.
Very conservative Christian school.
Okay, so it wasn't homeschooled, but it was very, conservative.
Well, why not go all the way? I mean, you started, go all... No,
well, that school was extreme fundamentalism. Are you familiar with Sword of the Lord Ministries?
It's right here in Nashville. Or it's in Murfreesboro.
Yes.
Yeah.
John R. Rice.
Oh,
yes.
boy, he's pretty tough.
Yes.
He's
well,
a tough guy.
That's the curriculum.
This school, his son-in-law and then 2 of his daughters, well, he also had 7 girls, by the way. 2 of his daughters were my teachers, and it was culottes. You familiar with culottes?
No. Yeah.
They look like a skirt, but they're divided like pants, but you can't wear pants when you're in that world. I was not allowed to wear pants my whole life. And they had to be 14 pleats around the waist, so they were full. They couldn't be...
There had to be exactly 14 pleats?
Yeah, that was a rule. 14 pleats.
It's 7 times 2. It's biblical numerology.
They billowed. No one looks good in them.
Yeah.
And so...
That's a first. We never had anybody on the show that had to wear 14 pleats that billowed.
Culottes.
We had to sew them. I mean, all the girls had to make them. You can't buy those
You just
things.
want to slap men for that. What is up with that?
Bob's getting mad.
Cut that out. Now, why would you do that?
Get mad, because that stuff makes me mad too. What fundamentalism, especially the branch I was raised in, what it did to me as a woman, it's been rough. Yeah.
Get specific.
Well, from a very young age, I mean, going to doctor's appointments when I was 5, 6 years old. Mm-hmm. I did not want to take off my clothes because of modesty. It was so ingrained in us at home. It was weird. And there's something about it that's, I call it the male gaze, which,
there is such
it feels like there's always the male gaze on you. There's female gaze on you too, but it's different. And I mean, even my father, who he meant well, he was in this, I mean, he would tell me to change my clothes because they were too form-fitting, and just the you become a woman who thinks all the time about, wanting to just hide your body.
Wow.
Really?
And as a teenager, it was very difficult. And I was the oldest, so my parents, as most parents do, they make trial and error and mistakes with their oldest, and they were very strict with me, very strict.
We can take this out if this is too personal, but when your body is changing shape, puberty.
When you're growing up, yeah.
And there's this sensitivity that you already had at age 5.
Yes.
So, like, your body is just 5. I mean, there's nothing sexual about that. But as your puberty and as you grow breasts and as your hips or whatever, things are happening, is there like a no, like you wish it wasn't happening? Or how am I going to hide this?
Well, my parents kind of freaked out. They really did.
Being the firstborn there,
yes,
like, here she comes. She's blossoming into a woman, and they're scared shitless.
Absolutely. They with me specifically, they said no more sweaters, no more knit fabrics for tops. My mom started making vests. That was so fashionable.
Hide the boobs.
Yes, so fashionable.
A mission to hide the boobs.
Yeah. And
okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, you're familiar with the Duggar family, I'm sure. Yeah. And we were Duggars before Duggars were cool, because it was way back.
Sure.
I didn't know anyone who was homeschooled except missionary children, and I was homeschooled my senior year. And now, you can meet people all the time who homeschool their children. I didn't know anybody. It was very early. It was, early 90s.
Would it be correct, or maybe I'm reading too much into it, that your mom and dad thought, oh no, she's not going to last the last year of high school.
Yeah, why'd they pull you?
Looking so hot, like this, or something. They wouldn't say that, but you know what I mean.
No, it's actually a lot worse than that, because the school ended up imploding because of child sex abuse that was covered up, by the way. There were actually 2 male teachers there who were molesting and worse to boys.
Jesus Christ.
And one of them was so flagrant, we all knew about it as high schoolers. We all knew about it. And he would, in study hall, or Bible class, he was my Bible teacher too, he would say, hey, and I won't say his name, but there was this one student who was a transfer from public school, so already vulnerable, they know who to groom. And he would say, hey, do you want to go pick up some donuts with me? And they would just disappear the whole class hour. And I heard later that he invited them over to his house. I've reconnected with one of my high school friends he's an atheist now. Don't blame him.
One of his victims.
So it imploded. And I've actually gone back and asked my parents, what did you know? Because why didn't anyone do anything? And I mean, the school imploded, but then there was no follow-up, nothing. He was just transferred to a different school.
This is where compartmentalization gets fucked up, because they're skilled at compartmentalizing the things that are unattractive, unappealing about life or hardness, or even like, the 6-day creation versus billions of years of evolution. They compartmentalize that because it doesn't fit their view. And there is that.
But other children are being harmed. The people are being hurt.
But that's an ugly. That's an ugly.
Yeah.
And they compartmentalize uglies.
I guess the Catholic Church does that too. Now,
yeah.
because I sit and I puzzle over that. How can you do that? These are little kids. You can't do that to little kids.
Well, I think they were trying to postpone exactly what happened, and that was the implosion of the school. So it's a lesser evil to let this guy do this stuff than to let this school implode. Mm-hmm. In their minds. Wow. I'm just saying, maybe.
Cover-ups are huge in Christianity. Mm-hmm. And that's another large part of my story, because, in the independent fundamental Baptist circles, it's rampant. Sex abuse is rampant. Mm-hmm. Child abuse is rampant too, physical. Once I opened my eyes to some of that, it actually happened in 2011, which is when all of this started. So you see, it's been this long road. But I watched a 2020 episode. I think it was ABC episode on the Independent Fundamental Baptists, and they called it IFB. They began discussing sex and child abuse, and I knew everyone in that video, in that show, by some degree of separation. Some I knew from college, some I knew from who went to those churches when they were younger. I knew every story.
So you're not exaggerating when you say rampant. I mean,
oh no.
I mean, like within, I don't know, 2 miles of this being the epicenter, there are all sorts of churches all around here. And there's child abuse going on in those churches.
Here's the thing. The Catholic Church gets so much flack for it, and rightly so. However, because of their oversight, that is how we know the numbers. Right. With Independent Fundamental Baptists, they are all independent. They say they are, not connected, although, there's certain categories like all the Bob Jones Independent Fundamental Baptists. In fact, in that ABC episode, they said, we are not a network. And so we call it the not work. My husband and I, we joke, the not work. They are a network, but they don't have any oversight. So the pastors in that, I promise you, I think they're a majority of psychopaths.
There's just less accountability.
There's no accountability. Yeah. They attract certain men because they believe in complementarianism and women being in submission. So men are just at the top anyway. And then the pastor is over that. And it's a very abusive authoritarian culture. Sure.
What's complementarianism? That's a new one for me.
It's you've heard it before, because it's just basically the woman submits to the husband. They're equal.
Of course.
But have different roles. Certain churches take it to different levels, and we came from the ones that it was extreme.
Yeah.
Well, they'd go all the way back to Adam and Eve, that it was not good that he was alone, and then God created him a helpmate. Oh, and so this is part of the New Testament takes that and says it's not good that men be alone, and that so these roles are you come alongside him and complement his existence, or his being lacks something, but they would probably not use the word lack, because that would diminish his power.
Never.
That it's a complement to what's already a strong man in the image of God. Because God made man, and from dust. Like, so there was he's but women were made from the rib of Adam, so they're a downstream creation, from.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the word helpmeet.
Helpmate. Yeah.
That's what we were. And that, there was a question you had on your thing to, what I think it was, what do you consider the most harmful theology? And I mean, there's so many to pick from, but the one that just, for me personally, just making Eve in the Bible be the one who tempted. Yes.
She's responsible for the fall.
Yes.
Yeah. And
just everything comes from that right there.
I think you're right. I think that justifies everything that's, for us to see women as inferior, weak, and to blame. That you've got some paying back to do.
Really?
Because of your gender.
Yeah.
Yes, we're more easily fooled.
Oh, I've never thought of that. But Eve was the one that was fooled by the serpent, not Adam. And so you guys are simple, or you're credulous.
Yes. I find that very amusing because I think that most of the women I know are the least deceived in their marriages. More
intuition than men, typically. Yeah. And they read people better, and they have... I think that women are more in touch with in a good way, with their amygdala, which is the fight or flight thing, because I've said on the show before, I don't think we even need that anymore. And a good friend of mine that's a female said, "Hey buddy, that's your privilege talking," because I don't go out to the store. I don't go anywhere where I'm afraid for my life, but women never go anywhere without being afraid for their life, or at least their safety. And so there is this, when I say intuition, and I think it can be taken to an extreme. I don't think it's healthy to be a hyper suspicious person. I think that's an extreme that can actually fuck up your life, But there is this base suspicion that women have, which makes them actually less credulous than men, and not this thing.
I think it makes
them
much better detectives and everything else.
Yeah.
I really think we should see more women detectives.
Well, and if we could say that if a man is a good detective, he's probably getting in touch with his feminine side.
Yeah, probably.
There you go.
I tell you, if I was a woman, I mean, I say this all the time, I'd be pissed. I'd be so mad. I'd be out just like that. How dare you? It's the Stephen Fry. How dare you? How dare you do that to me?
Yeah,
that's awful.
Well, I think we can say right now, and I'm the zeitgeist, the American culture right now, with this Harvey Weinstein thing and everything, and the Me Too, there really is an element of a line being drawn in the sand. I can feel it.
Yeah.
And I think culturally, we do this, humans. And I remember, like, when my wife back in '89, she was a teacher at a inner city daycare. She got accused by the mother of a 4-year-old that she had abused him. It was completely unfounded, but at the time in history, the pendulum in the justice system was swinging towards believing the accuser, the victim. Mm-hmm. And so she was, not innocent until proven guilty. You were guilty until proven innocent. Mm. And so she got, handcuffed and taken to jail, and she got checked in, with the whole...
Your wife.
Yeah.
Our Mindy.
Yeah, 1989.
Goodness. She is like the
she was fantastic with kids, et cetera, et cetera. But the pendulum was there. Right. And then it comes back, time goes by and they think, oh, we're really overreacting. So they come back to true center, but then it swings back, and now we believe... We don't believe the victims, and we believe the perpetrators more often than not, or whatever. And there's this zeitgeist swing in things. And I think right now we're experiencing a major shift towards women getting empowered to say enough's enough. However, I think that there's going to be an overreach to where when a woman is being abused, oh my God, all day long, she deserves to stand up and kick that guy in the balls, push back, don't, put up. But because of the inertia of it, there's going to be a lot of women whose husband yelled at their kids once because he spilled milk at the table, and they're going to say enough's enough. You know, I mean, they're going to want to be a part of this movement to say, I'm not going to put up with that shit anymore. When in fact, there might be just real human shit going on. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying, I mean, this is the swings that happen culturally.
You have a Me Too story?
I do.
I bet you do.
I do. And I think one of the questions that gets under my skin so quickly is, you know, why did these women wait so long to tell anyone? Why didn't they tell? And my own story is I didn't tell anyone until I was 40.
And when did it happen?
Kidding.
When I was 7.
By who?
An extended family member.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my.
And I've carried that with me for so many years. And I never told my parents. My parents, they never knew. I didn't tell anyone. I told one sister.
Until when?
Well, I told my husband, but I think I was 40 when I finally started talking about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how old are you now?
44.
Wow.
My wife had a Me Too story too. I said, like, what? I can't believe it.
You just found out recently?
Yeah, she just told me because everybody was talking about it. So she says, yeah, in college, you know, some guy was running around trying to grab me and stuff. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about that?
Well, here's a confession. I did it to my wife in choir class. So I was flirting with her.
Yeah.
And she would sit down, like we'd stand up to sing a song, and then she'd sit down. Well, I'm sitting next to her. Well, I'd put my hand in the chair so that she'd sit right on my hand.
Yeah, you're nasty.
And honestly, she came out swinging this year with, like, you know, that was abusive. And I'm like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well, look, George W. Bush.
Yeah.
Or George Bush, not the older one.
George H.W.
H.W.
Grab an ass.
Well, he's 93.
Well, he's 93 now, but that's not when he did it. He did it back in the 60s and 70s, didn't he?
Well, I thought, no.
It was recent?
It was recent. He was sitting in his wheelchair.
Anyway, sorry to get off your story.
Sorry
you know
about
what
that.
sucks is I just took her story and I made it about me. So I apologize. So.
Well,
No.
you're just sharing. I
like
Well, you started sharing
conversation.
Edie's. Well, we can say
Edie. Yeah. Anyway, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I just,
I'm
you know,
so
there's a
sorry
lot
you
of
had to go
shame
through
for girls and women, especially when you come from the culture I came from, with modesty being so big and
Isn't that
So what's
purity.
the story that you tell yourself in your head, not only from 7, but maybe by the time you're 16 and you kind of have some volition and free will, you're starting to get, and maybe in your 20s when you get your myelin sheath and you're starting to think for yourself, and you're still telling yourself a story that says keep it to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, he makes the guy makes the move, and you pay the price. What?
I mean,
story of the world.
it is the story of the women's world.
No.
Because you're
I
a
would
victim.
not have that.
You're a victim of the very act. But then what Bob's saying is that you become a victim of the secrecy and the cultural suppression of it. So it's a double. It's triple.
Man, God bless women.
So what was the
you know
context?
what I mean?
Have you seen therapists or about it?
I did.
What age was that?
After I couldn't believe anymore, is how I put it.
Your deconversion of
my
your faith.
deconversion.
So you're getting honest on a lot of fronts.
Yes.
And then this 7 year, when you were 7, is another area where you're saying, you know what? I'm going to get honest about that too.
Yes.
Good for you.
Well, it came to the surface, and I actually had my first and only, thank goodness, panic attack when, do you remember the Josh Duggar, the oldest Duggar boy?
Yeah.
He molested his sisters, and then he had that big Ashley Madison scandal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my Facebook feed, and I can't remember which one it was, you know, I have very conservative, surrounded myself in conservative world, and my feed was full of forgiveness for him. You know, God's a God of second chances, and basically no condemnation of him. Mm-hmm. And it triggered something in me.
And you had a panic attack.
I did. First and only one, and it was horrible. And so now I have a lot more empathy for people who have panic attacks.
Well,
So it feels like a heart attack. Right?
Yeah. I actually blacked out for very brief, but yeah.
And how immediate was it from the time you're sitting there reading, feed after feed in this thread of people defending him or justifying it or forgiving him? And blow by blow, it sends your heart rate and your breath and everything into like, I can't believe what I'm witnessing. Was it while you were sitting there at the computer, or how far later?
It was later. But I was thinking about it, and just
mulling.
Yes. And feeling so bad for, those girls, the sisters. They're in such a difficult predicament there. It's their brother. Yeah. Yes, I do.
Very intimately.
I do.
Do you know if any of your sisters were ever?
Well, I had a policy that I told myself as a young girl that if we were ever going to be around this person as a family, I would tell my parents to protect my sisters. And we never were put in the house again with this person, so I never told them. But I was very vigilant about that, being around that person.
See, it's funny because earlier, just before we started the show, we were talking about what you do for a living, and you said you were in the broadcasting business for a while and, on television. And there's a lot of creeps in broadcasting. And I would think that's where the abuse, if any, would have come from. But it wasn't. Nobody, apparently, people treated you okay.
I experienced sexism there for sure.
Oh, well.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, just even anyway, I don't even want to go down that
people
road.
People were promoted and, past you, or how does that look?
Well,
sexism in the workplace.
Well, back when I was hired, still the era of VHS.
Yeah.
My news manager, he pulled me into his office, and I look back at that now and think that was just so inappropriate, and shut the door. And he had stacks of tapes, and he just said he wanted me to, get something done to my hair. I forget. And, and he said, I've got a stack of resumes from other beautiful girls. And that was kind of just,
I see.
So, and then he wanted me to wear certain clothes, and I just,
Yeah, no, yes, I do know, because I witnessed that when I was in broadcasting.
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure on women in that industry. Yeah.
I think it's a terrible job for a young woman. It really is. I mean, because it's all about how you look. And to hell with what you say and what you produce, what you prepare.
This is I think capitalism. This is where I think capitalism sucks, because it's about rating.
Yeah, it is.
And tits and ass are what sells products and gets people to watch longer, et cetera, et cetera. And again, which goes back to when religion creates a taboo around sexuality and the female form. It literally becomes, the holy grail. In fact, what men do is they look at, like, I tapped that, or I hit that.
Yeah, sure.
They're going to a bar and they say, I'd hit that. It literally is a trophy. The forbidden fruit of it is what created the energy. In cultures where nakedness and human anatomy is, European beaches, where there's fully nude people playing volleyball. Anyway, this whole thing of like, I want to see beautiful women, and I can't. Even within Christianity, there was maybe even some compelling to turn off the lights when you're going to have sex. I mean, who knows what's going on? But anyway, there's just this suppression. If we're going to talk about Catholics, we're going to talk about the amount of sex that's going on in these Baptist networks. It's about oppression. You stop something, you dam up something as powerful as human sexuality, it's going to overflow somewhere inappropriately into children and all, everything that it has done. And it's going to create a thing where instead of just wanting to hear the news from a human mouth, you have to simultaneously hear the news through a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it's fucked up. It's really, really, really. We are steeped in a very. How are we ever going to get out of this? I mean, we have to really shift how we see each other, how we see things. We got to grow up. America is so immature.
We need more secularism in our culture.
Yeah.
And it's coming. I believe it is. I mean, I see that with the younger people.
The millennials, they're coming up.
Yeah. And even my daughter and son's generation, oh my goodness. It's so different. And I mean, we live in the Bible Belt, and it is so different in their generation. It gives me some hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't say this. Obviously, I'm not a scientist and I don't have any data to support this. But what if, because people would say, well, we used to have men and women's bathrooms, and that was good enough for us. Now there's this gender fluidity that everybody's scared of, and well, this ain't the way it used to be. Well, why can't we be evolving as a species? And the more the gene pool evolves, the more this binary gender kind of starts to become gray. Mm-hmm. And that, your genitals don't necessarily determine how you feel as a person, and how you feel may or may not even be male and female. There might be a third and fourth and fifth or somewhere on the spectrum of I'm both. And after a while, maybe this is what I'm saying about these millennials. They've picked their battles better. They see bullshit better. They don't have issues with like same-sex love or whatever. They're just like, this is okay, guys. It's norm. It's no big deal. Nobody's getting hurt. And I'm just saying evolution is happening. Yeah. And just like we've kicked and scratched to keep things the way they are because we're uncomfortable with change, as a species, we're uncomfortable with change. One of the most fearful things, death, public speaking, and change. Yeah. Pretty much. Well, we're changing and we're digging in our heels. And I don't know. It would be better if we weren't tethered to, old archaic ways of seeing the world that no longer fit reality. Yeah. Just saying. Yeah. All right. Back to you. We get on our commentaries here. So we really didn't kind of finish up where your two biological children are.
Yes, I've been all over the place here.
That's okay. It's great.
Okay. So once and this also intertwines with my son coming out to us as being gay. And I asked his permission to talk about it on here because he's not out, but, doing this as a pseudonym. But we had gone from this independent fundamental Baptist, really strict church. We jumped into another crazy cult, the Sovereign Grace Ministries, which that's a whole nother story. And then we started visiting, a United Methodist church was our last stop. Liberal. And I remember that one Sunday morning they had the Lord's table and they just said, everybody's welcome. And there was a lesbian couple that was there. And I mean, I just cried. It was beautiful to see that because after what I had been in, and this was all before I was completely out. And this is before my son. And he's along for this ride. He's at all these different churches and what you hear about gay people. And he was 12 years old. It was after we went to the Methodist church. He said he had known for 6 months. He didn't even know what being gay meant or was until he was probably that age. Unfortunately, we just were very sheltering, and didn't know anybody. And so
how old was he?
He was 12 when he came out to us. Yes. Yeah.
And he'd only known for 6 months prior to that, or at least recognized it.
But that's recognized. That's about right. That's when you kind of wake up to sex, I think.
Yeah. I think he had known for about 6 months, but he said, looking back, there was obviously to him, he was confused for a lot of his life about things. But anyway, he came out to me and it's so hard for me to look back because he was so scared. He was just shaking head to toe, just pulled me aside. And he said it was like the third time he tried to tell me. But I asked him before I came, I said, can you remind me what I said to you? Because it's kind of a blur for me. And he remembers everything. And he said, well, the first thing you said, you were trying to ask me questions like, are you okay? What's going on? And you asked me, are you questioning God? And I was so projecting on him because I had just realized.
You were questioning God.
Oh, I know it was more than that. And I was in hiding from everybody, including my husband, my family, the whole world. And so I had just, gotten to that point. And so he said, no, never, no, Mom, I'm gay and I think I'm gay. And so it was, but because I had deconverted, and I'm so thankful for this now, you guys, because I had gone on this long journey of, to where I studied about homosexuality and how I came to this loving place even before I deconverted. But I was deconverted. I had no baggage and I was able to just, hug him and tell him he's perfect. And it's actually something I'm really proud of that he had that response. It could have been so different. Yeah. It could have been so different.
We can take this out, but what was your husband's response?
Well, my son did not want to tell him. He was scared, but I went and told my husband, and my husband is just kind. He's a kind person. And while I am sure it's been hard in some areas, and we both worry so much about our families finding out, and they will eventually. And it's a scary thought to us because I just want to,
keep the
protect him from that hurt. And he is like the best kid. He is so loved by our family, and it would change a lot of relationships. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing about projection is that the reason he'd tried 3 times, and by the time he really finally got to the point where he's going to do it, he's shaking head to toe. What we do is we fill the vacuum. We do not know how they're going to respond. We do not know what's going on in their head on this area. And so humans fill the vacuum with worst case scenarios. Case in point, if you were at home waiting for your daughter to get home from a date or from a party with friends, she was supposed to be home at 11. It's 11:15. It's 11:30. It's 11:45. It's 1 a.m. That whole thing in that time frame, your imagination is going to see her dead in a ditch,
Yes.
in a car accident. She's been abducted. We need to call the police, missing persons report. You're going to go ape shit. The monkey brain fills the void with all kinds of things. So your son was afraid of your response because he'd filled the void with all kinds of imaginations. Right now, you've already said it. We started the show with this. You're filling the void of how your parents would respond. Maybe some of your sisters would respond. And there's a chance that because they love your son so much, this is what the movement did. The LGBT movement is that it proceeded quickly, much quicker than racism and things, other kind of marginalized people being accepted culturally, because they came out, they took the risk. But because people had already known them and loved them, then that cognitive, we're only able to hate, people that we can demonize, which is people that we don't know.
Yeah. And this is the question that I wrote when you said that too. You said you see trouble up ahead and you don't, if you came out, and what do you see is what I wrote down. What do you imagine?
Your parents.
Or anyway, your parents to start with.
It is difficult to think of, try to imagine. They are very, I think what would be the worst part of it is just how it might change how they feel about him. It would be very sad.
What about you?
Yeah.
How they feel about you?
Well, that's the thing here, because you're right. Parents are always the problem. Because in IFB culture, a lot of Christian conservative evangelicalism too, it's a choice. It's not, how you're born. It's not how you're wired. And so then they go looking at the parents. What did they do wrong? Right. And so, but the fact is, when he comes out and we're supportive of him, that is going to be probably a full coming out on my part, because it's probably going to all happen at once.
How old are your parents?
My dad just had his 80th birthday.
And they're healthy?
Yeah.
They could live another 10 years or, whatever.
Yes.
Do you plan on waiting until they're dead, or
I'm following my son's guideline as far as him coming out. That's up to him. He has,
and that's going to be your cue to come out.
Yeah. And I've been doing a lot of research. I'm good at research. And I've been doing, getting aware with, there's a parent organization, PFLAG, that helps parents of gay kids. And I've been doing a lot of research on that. And it is a coming out for everyone in the family. It's not just the person; it affects everyone, especially a teenager. Right.
Well, there are certain pieces on the puzzle board, and you can say, well, they could say, "You are no longer my daughter. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see you. You're not my
disown you. Yeah.
You're disowned. I'm taking you out of the will." Whatever they're going to do, they could go off the deep end and do that.
That would not be what I would expect from my parents.
Something less severe.
So something more in the middle then.
And quite frankly, there's a wall there already with both of our families, my husband and I family, because we moved away and we left Plymouth Brethren and went to Baptist. So we already were, we ended up getting shunned for a year by his family after that, years ago. And they don't know much about, but then this era of Trump, once again, I just decided to be outspoken about how I feel about Trump, which is very strongly against anything that has to do with him. And they've seen that. And already there's just a huge wall. We can't talk about it because they are Trump supporters.
Oh, they love him. Huh?
Yes.
Both your parents and his?
Oh, yes.
Your husband's? Yeah.
Isn't that something?
It makes me so sad, because for me, it's like, wow, how can you be a good person? It makes me question.
Yeah.
Well, that's a compartmentalization at work. Again.
It's amazing.
Well, also, in their circles, authoritarianism is is a plus. And so, Trump and his authoritarianism, I think they're attracted to that strong man. Most of the pastors I was under were very much like that.
Yeah.
So I think they were just primed to like him. And then, of course, he supports everything they do.
Yeah. Well, the Bible is an example. I mean, the structure in the Bible is tyranny.
Yeah.
And so they are very accustomed to, being told what to do. Paul said, I'm grateful for my chains. Like his slavery was a virtue. So yeah, authoritarianism is right in there with their wheelhouse. So that's, I've often thought that's how Trump got the evangelicals, is because it just at least tasted familiar to their, subconscious.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, maybe not conscious, but subconscious.
Right.
So, this thing, we have a community online on Facebook of over 200 ex-Christians that are listeners of the show and or former guests of the show. So we can say that I polled 200 ex-Christians and they came up with these questions. So we can treat it somewhat of a speed round. But if we land on, gold and, hit a mother lode, then we can unpack that and take as long as we want. But I'm just going to fly through them and see what happens. Was there a pivotal moment when you suddenly saw your life as bondage and or a moment when you felt a huge release?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, my entire upbringing felt like bondage. I knew we were not happy. I was very unhappy growing up.
Now, how do you know that when it's all you know?
It was a miserable home life.
Wow.
It really
Are
was.
your parents going to listen to this?
No.
Okay.
So you didn't laugh a lot. You didn't have a lot of fun, and you didn't go out?
Very serious as far as, there's very strict, and lots of rules. But, I mean, my father is, he's very loving. My mother was always having children, and I took care of those children.
Oh, being the oldest, you were the other mother.
Yes,
Right.
and my mother was very ill a lot, and so I had a lot on me, but then also so restricted. I mean, I never was allowed to do anything extracurricular, just very insulated, and, it was hard. It was hard. And
you changed a lot of diapers.
Oh, yeah. Well, but when I became a mother, it was just nothing. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It was nothing because, I was used to babies, and in some ways that's good. But
so take me into the bedroom situation of 7 girls. Do you have bunk beds?
Listen, we did. And we had a very small house, 3-bedroom house that I grew up in, 2 bathrooms. And so I slept in a room with, there were 4 of us, and I shared a bed with one of my sisters, like most of my life. We shared a bed.
Wow.
So when I went off to college, I was like, dorm life, wow, I can handle this. I've got so much space. And
How did your dad was obviously a scholar, or at least an intellectual. So where did you go to college?
I went to Bob Jones University.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't
count, but it still was college.
It was, yes.
Did all 6 of your siblings get an education? Or?
Only one other graduated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they get an MRS?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
You kind of did too, but you at least, you used
I finished
your degree.
college. I did set goals for myself.
Yeah.
Versus some of my sisters,
Yeah.
But
Great.
Well, the reason I went down the bedroom path is that when Bob was saying, did you laugh? I mean, was there any memories of like we closed the door and the parents are not listening and you guys created some
kids
fun?
goofing around?
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, we were incredibly sneaky kids. We really were. And part of that comes from all those hard rules. Like one thing I've noticed with my children are so honest. They're not sneaky. And that comes from parents who don't put a lot on you,
Yeah. Well, this goes back to my damn theory that you dam up the human spirit, whether it's sexuality or fun or creativity or whatever. You dam that up, it's going to find its way around. And so the sneakiness, you got an example of your sneakiness?
Oh, yes, I have many. For one thing, I used to think, man, I'm such a dishonest person. I felt guilt about that all the time because we did things behind my parents' back. Like we would listen to rock music, God forbid, because I loved knowing what other kids knew about. I wanted to know. And we weren't allowed to watch like the majority of television shows. And so we would sneak. The minute our parents would leave the house, we would go turn on. And we would watch MTV through the fuzz that we could, because MTV was huge when I was in high school. And we would watch it through, we didn't get MTV, but we could kind of pick it up a little. So we would watch that. And then we would tell our younger sisters, don't you dare tell on us, And so poor kids, and we would stay up late and talk. And I would tell my sisters stories. And then we had a code AA, which meant act asleep. We would just say that if we heard any footsteps in the hall.
Oh, that's great.
AA. And so we had a code. Yeah, we were very sneaky. Yeah. I did not, no, a lot of my sisters did sneak out around with boys. I was so scared of that. I never did. I never dated till college and very seldom there. Very, very little. Wow. So scared of boys.
All right. Next question. What do you want to bring with you as you exit your faith and old life? Like, is there anything redemptive about your old Christianity?
Everyone has to admit that without the life they led before, they wouldn't be who they are now.
Yeah.
And so
subconsciously, you bring a lot of it with you.
I do.
But anything come to mind as far as, for me, I still love, for example, you shall know the truth and it'll set you free. I believe that,
That's very good. Yeah, that's a good example. And I agree.
I believe that 1 Corinthians 13, love keeps no record of wrong.
Yes,
I think that was a good one.
I always loved the love passages and just the idea of loving your neighbor. That is, I think that would make everything better.
Exactly.
Why not? Take that.
Bring it.
Use that.
Bring it with you.
Sure.
And use some poetry and use some music and use some Broadway shows.
Well,
use them all,
Right.
to make us more human. Why not? That's what I say.
Well, that's the true agency of a person being the steward of not only their own happiness, but their own intellect, their own wealth of knowledge, that you get to smorgasbord all of it.
Yeah.
When you give yourself permission to do that. We don't have that when you're a Christian, typically. You can only get it from certain sources.
Yeah.
It's insular, like you said.
Use rock music, too. Why not?
Yeah.
It's got some truth in there. Okay.
Are you a reader?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you read a lot of fiction?
No,
mostly nonfiction.
Yes, mostly. I think because my time is so limited, I just have been.
You want to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, like a sponge the last 6 years.
Yeah,
for sure.
Me too. I read more nonfiction than fiction.
I read definitely more, but I definitely need one every now and then as an escape. I mean, it's why I watch certain TV shows and stuff. Is an escape, a tourniquet on my monkey brain. But I'm listening right now to an audiobook called "The Woman Who Slept with God," and it's fiction. And it's interesting.
You think?
It was it's very feminine. I mean, it's a very it was recommended for, I think, mostly women, but I'm pretty feminine, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
As a part of my commute, and it's fiction, and it's I don't know, it's a break from
Escapist.
Yeah. But the reason I was going to that, you talk about enjoying writing. Do you foresee a book in your future that you might pen?
Now there you go. That would be outstanding.
You got a story.
Got a great story to tell.
Maybe it would be really hard, like a memoir type thing.
Yeah.
It would be unkind almost to our family.
Yeah.
That's just so personal because it doesn't just affect me.
Sure.
I'm just not sure, but I do write a lot down about it. So who knows?
Yeah.
You write under a ghost name and you make it a fiction.
Yeah, exactly. Do fiction. And then you can make it turn out the way you want to.
Yeah. You can use some creative license there for that.
Yeah.
All right. What about your change in viewpoint? Was there a specific moment or event or a number of events that caused your change in viewpoint?
Yes, I haven't really talked about that. And I mean, there were some very pivotal moments. And one was when I started uncovering all of the abuse in our circles. And I ended up there was a week that I was up all night, every night, just finding stuff. And in fact, I keep on my phone, I call it the Christian Leader Hall of Shame. And it's what you have to qualify to get on that list is a news story where you were either arrested or convicted. I don't do, hearsay or speculation things. And I just save those links in my notes. And it takes a lot of links to fill up one note. I have 4 of those, and I only started this a year ago. Just starting, sex abuse cases or, whatever. And it's just rampant. And I guess I'm a little hyper alert to it. And so I notice it. I follow some survivor groups. So I see all the stories that come through, and it just keeps hitting me. Like it kept hitting me the whole time I was questioning other things. So there was that. And then there was adopting this child with special needs. Changed our lives incredibly. He had, behavioral issues, health issues. He was just fragile. The first year was the hardest year of my life in many ways. In some ways, it was the best year too. But that year, I was unable to attend church, and we were still an IFB church. I was I couldn't bring him, like, when I would try to take him to church, he would become overwhelmed. He bit my face one time, and he couldn't handle it. He had been in a Russian orphanage. He was 4 years old when we brought him home. He had just started walking. So, just neglect. And he was only 18 pounds when we brought him home. Tiny. I know.
As a 4-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
My gosh.
He's still a little peanut, but he had so many issues. And I had to start staying home from church. And my husband was questioned all the time about my absence. There was no understanding. There was no resources at the church. In fact, Christians had a rather poor reaction to his adoption at my church. It was almost like a novelty, or just like, what have you done kind of reaction. There was no, I tried to take him in the nursery after a little while. And I mean, other parents were scared for their children because he might hurt them, although I was being very, careful. Anyway, it was just a really hard time. And one time my pastor actually said to me, I just want you to know that we understand that you are not able to come to church right now. We're not keeping track of how much church you're missing. And something in me snapped. I'm never confrontational, but I was like, I should hope not.
Yeah.
But they were, obviously.
Yeah,
Of course.
That's why you felt the need to say that.
I was furious. So it was not long after that we left that IFB church, which we had been at for years. And that was just horrendous for our family. Our kids had grown up there, and my daughter would have been 11 or 12. So she had been raised in this church.
Yeah.
So that was very pivotal, leaving that church. And then when you start visiting other churches, wow, it's torture, but it's also very eye-opening. You're just like, everybody has their own flavor. Everybody has, their church is the right one. It's just interesting. So there was that. And then researching into special needs and brain damage done by neglect, or, fetal alcohol syndrome, which my son has not got that diagnosis, but that's very common from Russia. Just researching all that. And it just started shaking my belief system about original sin and people being culpable for their actions. I just started questioning that. And so I started reading psychology. Mm-hmm. And then those are the big things. I have a whole list of things that, it's like the house of cards, slowly coming down. But those were big for me. But that wasn't enough. Like emotionally, being upset with the church, being upset about sexual abuse, being upset about their reaction to my little child, those things, that was the emotional side. But I was the theology was extremely important to me.
Doctrinally, you were still.
Yes. And so I had to do so much research. And honestly, I know you were very vulnerable about your depression. I didn't realize I was in full-on depression, and started about 2013, I guess. It came out as exhaustion and inability to sleep.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know enough about depression. It didn't exist in my world before that, because, it's not real.
Yeah.
You just got to be more spiritual.
Yeah. Say a few more prayers or something. Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
My faith wasn't strong enough. I wasn't close enough to the Lord. So I didn't know what was going on. But what that did for me is I spent, the next year plus just up every night reading on every subject you can imagine.
Wow.
And educating myself about evolution. And my husband and I, we both joked about it. Like it was so scary pulling up certain websites. I am not kidding. You probably understand a little bit. It's just, you think, oh, if I look at this, what's going to happen? And God is watching, of course. And so, even questioning things like hell, that was a big one. I
think the first time that I've said this about the Christopher Hitchens book. Just going into a Barnes & Noble and seeing the cover, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. I was kind of like, oh.
Don't even go near the table.
Exactly. Right. There's this vibe that's just because you're afraid to. Well, for one thing, he's talking about my best friend. I've said this on the show before. It's a little offensive, but there is a part of you that says, I can't afford to go down that path because I might lose that which is most precious to me, my faith, my relationship with God, etc., my salvation. But then when you start watching YouTubes of hits tearing down, or anything else, or just whatever. I mean, what were some of when you say certain websites that you and your husband were exploring that were scary, does anything come to mind?
Well, one of the podcasts that I listened to that I started like right around the time toward the end, is Reasonable Doubts. And I think you've heard of that.
Yeah, sure.
It was excellent. And it went in, it revealed how little of the Bible I knew, even though I had been in church 3 days a week.
Sure.
Many, many services, taught Sunday school. I just was shocked at all the stuff I did not know about the Bible. It's just, we're kept in this bubble. And so that was one thing.
It's almost like Christianity. A lot of pockets of Christianity have airbrushed the Bible.
Yes. Yes.
You just gloss over that part where, where Elisha killed all those kids for calling him bald or whatever.
Yeah. Or, Lot offering his virgin daughters to be raped, or the concubine who was cut into pieces and mailed.
Jephthah made a covenant with God that the first thing that walks out the door when I come home from winning this battle, I'm going to sacrifice to you. And it was his daughter.
And he followed through on it.
Yeah, kind of. There's some ambiguity enough to where a lot of people tell themselves he cast her out to where she didn't die, but she became expelled from the house, all kinds of shit.
There's a lot of stuff. And then I didn't understand. I had no idea how the Bible was put together. I didn't look into it ever, so I can't. I went to Bible college and I still did not know how it was assembled. They're not going to
teach Bart Ehrman there.
No, and I read a lot of Bart Ehrman. I have all of his books on my Kindle. So speaking of debates, I don't know how many debates I've watched. It almost reveals how little sleep I got for about 2 years. But it's maybe triple digits.
You binged.
I've watched, you just name two people, one person, I've seen a debate with him, mostly men, but just hundreds. And then I started listening to your podcast, and I was going to mention this to you because I remember a while back there was some thought that someone wrote that perhaps you should veer away from people who are deconverting into, moving on or something that maybe people were at a different place now and wanted to hear different stories further along. And I was like, no, because this podcast, it really was one of the first ones I discovered when I was still a Christian, and it was safe because it said agnostic in the title. Yeah. And I started listening, and I just clung to the stories that I could relate to, especially in my world. If anybody even suspected, they would be so shocked at how far I've gone because of the world I was immersed in. It's just, I was so lonely and still am really, but it was very helpful. And so, yeah, what you're doing is very important for just the regular people.
Yeah. Well, it's a big deal because you're not alone, and that in itself serves a great purpose to a lot of people because they are you're in East Tennessee. So can we say that on the air?
Sure.
Okay. That it's
just yonder.
Yeah. Yeah. You're immersed in a world that thinks that the way you're thinking and seeing the world now is very scary to them, and so you become scary to them if they knew.
Yes.
They would have to shun you, and they have. Your husband's parents cut you off for a year just because they figured out that you'd left that certain sect of the Baptist church.
We left their church, yeah.
I read something that you might be interested in this past week. There were more than 30,000 Christian flavors of Christian religion.
Denominations?
Denominations, but...
sects.
Yeah, sect. 30,000. I think it's up closer to 35,000. That's
around the world?
Around the world. And it's like... And who's right?
Yeah, and they all think they
all think they're right,
right? Or they wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
By definition, if they're there, they think they've found the best way. And you know what? All 30,000 of those are revolving doors, though, because eventually something happens politically, or just a human error or abuse happens. That church splits, and then they go find a better version, and it's just a matter of time. So when a church says that we've grown X amount, that's mostly people just transferring from other churches. It's not new converts as much as people would like to think.
No, you don't. You rarely see adults become saved or start going to a church from another background unless there's something really.
And all religions have figured that out, and that's why they spend so much focus on children.
Yeah, that's very true. And the numbers that are out there are you can't figure out if they're true or not. Because there's no way to track them.
Yeah. It's not empirical evidence.
Yeah. So.
Well, I want to say this about you and what I maybe picked up on those, because basically the answer to this question is as far as what changed your viewpoint, the amount of abuse that you discovered, and it sounds like that you've kind of made it your personal mission to document and call, at least this should not go unnoticed. And even if it's just me and my little iPhone or whatever, the documentation I have to show this. And you're familiar with with the underbelly of what's going on in these churches. And second thing was, your experience with your adopted children with Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And these were pivotal, life-changing events. And I'm intrigued with the sense of justice that we have as human beings. There's a Wikipedia site called Just World Hypothesis, and it mostly has to do with everything happens for a reason, and somebody who really needs for the world to be just and the world to be fair. And so a lot of especially white Americans that never leave their county line, they are very isolated and what is it in the hospital when you quarantine? They're quarantined from the ugliness of the world. In fact, if like that, maybe that commercial that comes on that shows these little babies in Africa with swollen bellies and flies coming in and out of their nostrils, they're just going to change the channel. I mean, and I feel that temptation. I don't pop my bubble. We call that a buzzkill. I mean, in some ways, it's like when I go to my school, that is probably a magnet school or it's a Christian school or whatever. I'm surrounded by whites. Mm-hmm. I'm surrounded by people that dress like me, look like me, believe like me, think like me, raise their kids just like me, and it is safe. And in a way, the world is a good place when that's all you know of it. And, that movie, the M. Night Shyamalan movie where the village, outside the walls, and everybody was afraid of what was out there. And so anyway, where I'm going with this is that I think growing up, I could speculate that you had a strong sense of justice. And maybe it translated into when you started seeing all these sex crimes, it was like, this is not right. You wanted to do something about it. When you saw the video of your, the babies that you've adopted, like, this is not right. And I want to make this right. But I also hear that even in your skepticism and your critical thinking that you developed as a secularist, as a humanist, is that you've also had to embrace that the world is not fair and I can't fix it all. But it sounds like you've done a good job of reining in your Messiah complex or anything that you might have to save the whole world. You're saving 2 kids at a time in this case, and you're helping maybe protect women from further predators by exposing these stories or whatever. I mean, I don't know. Am I hitting on anything as far as your own sense of justice and how you navigated, going from a bubbled world, an insular world, to the real world, and how you deal with that own internal sense of justice?
Yes, that's very insightful. I think you're right about that. It's very difficult to see suffering and pain for me. And I just almost feel it along with the person.
Empathic.
Yeah, I know that's maybe a rare character trait, but my therapist did mention to me that I showed signs of that. And it's not always a good thing because you can end up just feeling weighed down all the time.
It contributes to depression, for
yeah,
sure.
It does. Yeah. Absolutely. That's when I got my diagnosis. And the comforting thing for me now that I hold on to, and I mentioned earlier, is finding a new purpose in life after you deconvert is a challenge. But I have these beautiful children who they need me. They are in a better place
because of you.
Their future was very bleak.
You're making the world a better place.
So in just the smallest corner, and to me, that is, if everyone did that, that is how you find, right. Yes.
If everyone did that, it'd be a great place.
And you don't have to do big, broad, I love people who go on do big, broad things, but I also think just this little thing is just so wonderful for me. It's what I cling to, and I love them so much and look at them and see the future in them, just the goodness that can be. So it's very small, but it helps. Because it's really hard. Yeah.
There's a mentality out there, and I've heard this before, and I know there's a better way of phrasing it than what I'm about to, but there's this sense that when you do service, when you're in the work of service, that the irony or what we used to call in Christianity, the paradox of it is that by sacrificing yourself, so you go into a situation where, you're sweating and, like hardness. And yet, if they were to like somehow measure those people, as opposed to the Trump mindset, whereas the more saunas, the more helicopters, the more yachts, the more I try to feed the appetite of more toys, the less happy a person gets. Then the happiest people in the world, are probably the people that are in the trench, in the blood, sweat, and tears of helping make the world a better place. There is something internally not only robust about one's internal life, but the satisfaction they get from these acts of service, that they're actually psychologically and mentally a happier person than, say, a billionaire trying to just pursue, hedonism.
Yeah, fill a hole in his life with stuff.
Yeah.
I believe that. And there's actually a study done on families with children with Down syndrome, and they rate overall happiness higher than the average American. And that's very contradictory in a lot of people's thinking.
Paradox, yeah.
Yes. But it is so true, because I think you learn to appreciate the small things. The milestones are so much smaller when you have an intellectual disability or any disability in your family. And so, yes, it's just learning to appreciate things on a smaller. I scaled my life back, and it was one of the best things I did, because I kept on saying yes to everything, and I was just the perfect mom. And say yes to everything. Well, in the bad sense of the word.
Right. No, I get it.
But I did. I just volunteered for everything I could, and just kind of farmed myself out, and then tried to be this perfect Christian mother and wife. And that has a dead end at the end of it. Okay. Yeah. That is not a good place. And I hit a wall after I adopted my first child. And from then on, I've just scaled down, including my faith has changed. And it's been wonderful in that sense. It's also been very difficult in another sense, but
wow.
Well, just take a typical American kid that their pursuit of entertainment is to come home from school and turn on the TV or whatever. I mean, like to find something. Actually, it's not even the TV anymore. It's Hulu and Netflix or whatever.
Video games, whatever.
And there's something hollow about that. And as far as I really needed for this to give me a feeling of depth that maybe my subconscious is wanting. And it's maybe like I really needed a big meal, and I got a crumb from this show. And yet I have to kind of tell myself that I'm happy now. Whereas I think when you're really helping somebody who needs you, like your Down syndrome kids, etc., that's a steak and baked potato. That's really fulfilling, because I just think there's something hollow about some of the pop culture of America being like, this is where I'm going to get my high. I don't know.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think so. Media's in the boredom killing business. They're not in any other kind of business. That's from the Network movie.
Yeah.
Media is not in the truth telling business. It's in the boredom killing business.
Wow. See, that's exactly what I was trying to say, and you did it in one sentence.
Oh, well, I think that's true.
It's very true.
Now, one of the guys on the...
I know where you're going with this.
I'm just going to say the question. We can take this out and do whatever we want. He said, any premarital sex? If so, did you feel like you were going to hell for giving up your virginity? If you remained a virgin, did you regret abstaining?
I mean, no premarital sex. No.
So you waited till after you were married?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
because we've had both men and women on here saying, they felt terrible about it too. They had premarital sex, and they knew that God was what.
Yeah,
right. They go into their marriage with lots of baggage. Yeah. With that. Yeah, and it's all it shouldn't be there, but. But no, I grew up just, and in my world, the women were the police of that. So you were responsible for remaining. So, you just kept you keep the boys from doing anything. So, I was very vigilant about that. So.
Wow.
So did you ever have to run away from him?
I had to put the brakes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to whack him on the head, I think.
Yes.
Or something. With a rubber chicken.
So you and was your husband raised Quiverfull?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
So you didn't bring that to your marriage. You just had two kids. I mean, you
That's
didn't.
Right.
So did you make conscientious choice to not do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts on like what the formation of those thoughts? I mean, you resented the full quiver?
I did. I felt like I was an adult from age 9, is about when, I had several sisters by that time. So yeah, I resented it. And then when I finally, I never lived on my own. I went straight from my parents' house to college, then straight into marriage. And so I never had a chance to live on my own. So I just wanted to be free for a while by the time I got married. I just wanted to be free from all the trappings of that. And so I didn't even really want to have children for a long time. And I waited a while. So
how long after you got married?
5 years.
Okay.
5 years. And we traveled and we, did some fun stuff. And so we didn't take things very seriously the first few years of our marriage, but then you just do. I don't know. You're in these circles and you have kids and then you get more serious about it. And then all the fear-based came in again. So we started getting more and more conservative as our children came along. So unfortunately, but yes,
interesting.
Did
you get any pushback from your mom, who was a Quiverfull person?
Well, I'll tell you, I wore pants. Sounds so silly now, but I wore pants one time. I know, and I was working at the news station, and I wore pants one time and took my sisters to a ball game with the news station, and they got to meet all the news people, and they were so excited. And after that, because I wore pants, my parents wouldn't allow them to do anything with me for a year because they were much younger, for like almost a year. I had to.
Because you wore pants.
Yeah. I went against them in front of my sisters. They would probably deny that now, but it is fact. And they have lightened up a lot because some of my other sisters coming along. Pants were the least of the problem.
What's pants about?
There's no scripture for that,
is there like the man wears the pants? Is that the thing?
There's some scripture in the Old
pants?
Testament about
really
not dressing like the man. Women should look like women, men should look like men, and they just take it another level.
They look like women. They got pants on. What's the problem?
I agree. I do not wear men's pants. I wear women's pants. They're different.
Yeah, it's a very evil thing in the Old Testament when the genders start to blur. It's a big deal especially the Old Testament. Well, let's go straight into the segue of what do you do for fun? Because if you felt like your childhood was robbed of you, and you're talking about that 5 years, it's good that you actually just kind of let yourself not take things too serious. So now, what do you do for fun?
Yes. Now we've made another decision to be less serious for a while. So I'm trying to jump on every activity that, for instance, we just went a couple weeks ago to the liberal redneck, Trey Crowder.
To his show. Yeah, he's great.
It was so outrageously funny. It was great. We just had a great time. And then I've already booked tickets for Chris Hart coming to the area soon. And so we're going to try to do things like that. And then we love not movies so much anymore, just TV, Netflix, and have certain shows and, Yeah.
What about your circle of friends? Do you have community that you can be yourself around and let your hair down, so to speak?
Well, I'm working on that. I really am. I have to be very intentional about it because I'm pretty closed off in my, life that I lead because I'm not working. But I have one friend who I did come out to, and she came out to me at the same time. We were doing that little dance, I think she is, and that was wonderful. We were both homeschooling moms. And so, same age, similar, we know a lot of the same friends. And so we've talked a lot about it, and she's actually in our support group now. You added her in, and she's finding that valuable too, because, it's a tough world we're in. And then I have sought out, I met a lot of women when I went to the Women's March.
Oh, wow. The one in Washington? The big
Knoxville.
One?
No, I just did the
Knoxville.
smaller one. Yes. Okay. And it was great, though. There were lots of people there. And I reconnected with a few people. And then, of course, some of the adoption community people, including the woman who's non-religious. So I have these friends, and I do get to go out with them sometimes. And that is very, very important for me, liberating and wonderful. But because the rest of my life, I have to be so careful.
Sure.
I've talked to my therapist about it, and because it just feels so duplicitous. I just don't like the way it feels. And she just said that there are times where we have to make choices to be protective. And right now, that's just where we're at, especially with my son.
What about drinking? I guess you didn't.
I had never drank anything until after we left that IFB church in 2013.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Never done. I've never done, had never, but now I enjoy
Like a glass of
wine all the time. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever smoked pot?
No.
Still to this day.
Still, yeah.
Well, we can settle that tonight. No, I'm just kidding.
Listen, it's on my bucket list.
Bob says no, huh?
I'd sooner get a beer or a drink or something. Yeah, that's just me though. Yeah, it's not. It just makes me want to sleep. It mellows me out till I get ripe and fall off the tree.
So this friend of yours you came out together. Is she married?
Yes.
Is her husband out, or like is he deconverted, or?
I don't think he has ever really been a strong.
Okay.
So I don't think. Yeah.
It's
so she doesn't have that, but she does have. We're fortunate we don't live near our family, but she has all her family and goes to church with them. So she and
she's still going.
Yeah, we commiserate on Sundays afternoons. I'm always like, I'm so happy I'm not going to church.
Really.
Do you and your husband take time to go out on dates?
We do. We did. We went last night on one. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
That's great.
Yeah.
And you have sitters that are good with the boy.
Well, fortunately, I have 2 teenagers now.
They can handle.
And
So you don't need a sitter.
No, I mean, they're very busy though. Teenagers.
Sure.
They're so busy. But we were fortunate enough every once in a while that somebody's home. And so we're able to go out.
That's excellent.
It's not often, but we try.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
What do you drive?
Prius.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty liberal. Your parents approve of that?
I'm sure they would say stuff behind my back, but no, I don't know. We travel a lot. And I, because of where I live, about 45 minutes from the children's hospital, and I have 2 special need kids. So it just saves us money, and it's a great car.
Yeah, they're great cars, and it's a small.
It's cheap car. We're really on a budget. So, we have another bigger car, but I don't drive that one.
Yeah, a smaller footprint.
Do you have any like Netflix or Hulu binges that you've done that you've enjoyed?
I'm terrible about binging. We've already established that I stay up too late, but I'm into true crime. And so I don't know why.
Season 1 was amazing. I never saw season 2.
Oh, I just mean true crime in general, but I did watch that show too.
Oh,
yeah.
But I like that show too. Season 1, I didn't watch season 2 either. But I'm into anything that's true crime, and I'm fascinated with psychopaths and
Yeah.
Well,
And
then you're gonna love. Have you seen this, Bob? It's called Mind Hunter, and it's awesome. Honestly, you would love this just based on what you've just said. But it is based on real story. It's a timepiece? What do you call it when it's a
period piece?
Period piece. 70s, 60s, all the cars, all the way they dress. Okay. It's the first time that psychotherapy, or at least psychology, was introduced into criminology.
Okay.
Like they went from like all the gangsters that would kill people and stuff. They have motives. They literally, everybody understood why they killed that guy, because he stole money from me or whatever. We entered into that period where there were the first serial killers, and there were freaks, basically that they could not understand the motive, and they made no attempt to do so. And it just became this weird thing. Well, there was literally, I think this is the true story. There were 2 investigators, and that became intrigued with the why. In an effort to be able.
This is in my wheelhouse,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's really
Netflix,
well done. Netflix Mind Hunter.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Check it out.
Yeah,
It's very addictive. You get pulled in and then you want to binge. It's one of those. Yeah.
Thanks.
Now it is a bit, but it's really well done.
Hey, what about The Handmaiden's Tale? Did you watch that on Hulu?
Oh, yes, I watched it, and I just finished reading the book. So there was a piece of fiction I read.
Yeah.
But my daughter had to read it for school too, which so I read it too, just because it was there.
That is freaky.
I relate so much.
I bet you do.
to
Wow.
that it's scary how much I relate to that, and to some people it probably seems so far just not even possible.
Yeah. That's
I
cool.
relate.
That's cool, because there are people that are like, oh, that would never happen, but that's a privilege talking, I think.
Yeah. No,
Even my husband thought the storyline was a bit absurd, and I kept on being like, how can you say that?
Because he's a man.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I am woman, hear me roar. This is the age. I mean, you're watching it, you're experiencing it, and you're part of it.
I hope you're right.
It seems like there's a culture shift happening.
I hope. I'm not as optimistic, I don't think, but it's just because I know the stigma that comes after this, and when it comes to your job or your livelihood, women still, it's going to be scary.
Well, I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but there is this backlash. So Obama gets president, and we think, wow, we're really chugging along. And then here comes Hillary, and we get Trump. Seriously, that's totally a backlash from, the demographic that sees the progression happening of the first black president. And then they see the next is woman, and literally she could have been the most, saint woman. They still would have chose Trump over her because of backlash.
I agree.
Yeah. But remember, the system chose Trump, not the people.
Yeah, 3 million and gerrymandering and all of that.
Yeah. So
I don't think America is ready for a woman president. We have a ways to go yet.
I hope.
I mean, I want to believe that we are, but
Yeah, come on.
We were ready day one.
Industrialized nations.
In that we would have benefited from it from day one. But
she would be greatly hated, of course, by the evangelicals, that's for sure.
Well, whoever it is will be a trailblazer, and it'll get ugly for them, but they'll pave the way for more to come after.
That's right.
Did you happen to see the movie Bad Moms?
Yes.
What'd you think?
I laughed pretty hard. I don't remember much of it, actually, now that you say that, but I remember watching it with some friends.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but it became my wife's favorite movie, and she's seen it like 6 times.
Oh, yeah. There's one scene I remember, and just when they went wild in a grocery store, and I was like, that looks like so much fun right now.
Yeah.
Just to let loose.
Well, they have a new one out now for Christmas.
The Christmas one,
Bad Christmas Moms or something.
Really?
I don't know what it's called. Yeah.
Well, Elle, thanks for coming on. It's been really good to pick your brain and to hear your story. I mean, your perspective is, especially to 2 white guys like us. I mean, we're
clueless.
We really are clueless, and you know it. And thank you for being graceful towards us, for being as ignorant as we are.
Well, thank you for having me and for letting people who are just regular people come on and share.
Yeah.
It took me a while to decide to do this, but I just thought if there's any women listening who can relate to what my life is even currently, or a parent who's maybe struggling with a child who came out as gay, those might be helpful to someone out there.
Sure.
So that really was my motivation. It took me a year after the group to decide maybe I should, but they were such a help to me. The stories have been such a help to me.
Yeah, we're so happy you did. And I hope there's people out there, like you, that are thinking, I've got a story too. More women. I think women get the shitty end of the stick constantly. So it'd be interesting to have...
I do latch on to any of the stories you have that are women when they come on. I latch on. In fact, that's one Zoe, after her, I joined the club. It was that was one of my favorite episodes, and I'm still in touch with her. Yeah.
Are you?
Story.
Yes, I am.
I just did a follow-up interview with her.
Oh, good.
About her husband's suicide.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad that you've joined the online community. And in a way, like at this point, I would like to say to any women out there that would like maybe to contact you, we can't give out your email on the air here, but if they want to join that group and then figure out
Facebook,
who you are, and your name's not Ellie,
no,
but, or Elle, then they could reach you that way. And
that would be great. Absolutely. I mean, that would be rewarding to have, someone reach out if they need someone.
Yeah. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elle.
Thanks.
So that's our talk with Elle. I can't thank her enough for coming in and sharing her story. She drove in from East Tennessee to be with us here in the studio. We ended up having dinner together later, and it was just a real delight to meet her. We have remained in contact since. I hope you enjoyed her story. I know I enjoyed hearing it and presenting it. So thanks for listening. Love you guys. Bye-bye.